Today's show is sponsored by Vasion Print. The problem with print is it's a resource suck. IT teams are spending too much time on troubleshooting and upkeep. The biggest offender? Print servers. So get rid of them. Swap your outdated, resource-intensive infrastructure for Vasion Print, formerly known as Printer Logic, and get serverless, direct IP, secure printing for any device, anywhere. Centralized print management reduces overhead and workload and increases productivity, which is great for your IT team and your bottom line. Increase security, remove scripts and GPOs, and enable self-service user deployments. Secure, seamless, and scalable. That's what you get when you eliminate print servers. See how at Vasion.com.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everybody is doing well. First Cloudcast of July, second half of the year of 2025. Hope everybody's doing well. We are doing, as we always do, once a month, the Cloud and AI News of the Month. We're going to cover all of the big things in June for, looking back on what happened over the last month. We, this week it's going to be, this month, it's going to be me and Brandon Whichard. Aaron is off traveling, doing some work stuff and wasn't able to join us. But the two of us really dig into a couple of the big stories in Cloud and AI news. But in particular, we really dig into a session, a presentation, a kind of an event that went on called East Meets West, West Meets East. And we really dig into some big trends, some really interesting data that came out of the presentation, that came out of this analyst firm that has access to a decent amount of information to be able to make some good analysis and good forecasts of where things are going. So I think you're going to enjoy this one. I think Brandon and I, spent a little bit of time digging into this presentation, digging into the data, and it is very eye-opening. Some of the things that they present, and really kind of if you think about them a couple of years going forward, and just kind of the fact that we are in this big shift. I think they do a really good job of really highlighting, kind of potentially how big this shift is going to be from an AI perspective, whether it's around technology, whether it's around usage, whether it's around which companies are going to lead coming out of this, and it might surprise you as to what some of their conclusions are. But really fun show. I really enjoyed it. Hope you guys enjoy it. And let's get to it right now. Today's show is sponsored by Factor. Is your help desk still asking security questions like, what's your mother's maiden name to verify callers? If your organization uses Okta, Factor Identity Portal transforms caller verification, allowing you to authenticate users instantly using their Okta-enrolled MFA factors like SMS and Okta Verify. Reduce call times by 60%, eliminate social engineering risks, and streamline help desk operations with one unified dashboard. Check out Factor's Taco AI, the first AI agent for Okta, on their website. Visit factor.io, that's FCTR.io, and you could try it free for 60 days. Time to retire those security questions and switch to 2025 standards. And we're back. Another Cloud and AI News of the Month. Join this month by the great Brandon Whichard. Brandon, how are you? How are things down in Austin, Texas?
I'm doing fantastic. It's the end of the sports season here, as we've talked about on all of the Cloudcasts. But fear not, you've been talking about this for years, but I feel like we've now reached free agency in tech, and it's now free agency in the world of AI researchers. So like we follow, NBA signings and your favorite sports team, soccer players being signed, we're now going to follow our favorite AI researchers and see who gets the first billion or multi-billion dollar, or maybe that's already happened. Deal. So, I've been thinking about that. And then I've been counseling my son who's about to enter high school. I'm like, I don't care what you do, but you should maybe give this AI research, give it a strong look before you make your choice.
I love starting there, because that is essentially the story of the month, which it feels like it hasn't necessarily been like a huge news story, but it has felt like a month that is filled with just a bunch of announcements of insane amounts of money. And Ben Thompson had an interesting, he did an interesting show about it. I think his show was called Sharp Tech. It's one of his spin-off shows. And yeah, he was basically talking about how he was trying to compare NBA basketball salaries to these parent salaries that Mark Zuckerberg is throwing around for AI researchers. And it's kind of fascinating to hear him talk about it. I know he's trying to make some sort of reasonable analytical, comparison, but he's like, well, NBA teams, make this amount in revenue, but, Google or Facebook could make this amount. And how do you compare what those guys are worth? But, I don't. So let me ask you a realistic question. So let's suppose you were an AI researcher. You're fantastic at doing whatever researchers do. What do you do if you get that call from Zuckerberg? Like he calls and goes, "Hey, it's Mark. Want the $100 million deal?" Like what's your initial reaction to that? What's your initial response to that $100 million alleged number that's being thrown?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's alleged. I think it's it's pretty factual. So, well, I think it depends a little bit who you are. Like, I think you have the Ilya Sutskever, I don't know, whatever you want to call him, the Michael Jordan or the LeBron James, or pick your favorite person. So, I mean, he's looking at a company he's founded that's now worth $32 billion, and they've said they're never going to build a product. So it's like, I don't know. I agree. He's already has fame, fortune, and is in a position where he can kind of do whatever he wants. Now, I think if you are, now I just read before the show here, a couple OpenAI researchers, people that I don't know them by name, but doesn't mean they're not great, but I think they're further down the food chain. And I think maybe they don't have quite that type of opportunity. So for them, I think it is, as somebody asked a famous athlete, where are you going to sign? He said something like, there's a bank in every city. And it's like, I kind of think, to kind of borrow that, I was like, hey, I mean, if you're an AI researcher and you're kind of going to be, if you think you're going to be generally doing the same thing anywhere, right? Like they all have access to it. Like, why not take the most money? Because you've got to think about it too, more of a rational betting kind of person. It's like, well, Zuckerberg and Google and, OpenAI, they're playing to build $1 trillion company, right? But for you, even if you're at the $1 trillion company, you're only going to get a small fraction of that. But if you can lock it in, if you can lock in a guaranteed 100 million, I mean, it's crazy that I'm saying that out loud. It's like, that's generational wealth, right? And that's really no risk. You're getting the money either way. So it's like, I don't know, so if I'm that kind of person, I probably take the deal. If I'm Ilya Sutskever, it's probably why not roll the dice? Be like, my company's worth $30 billion. We'll see if I can make it worth $1 trillion. But yeah, I think as you've said on the show many times, it's generally best to take the money. I think we have many examples of that. Docker just came to mind again. That's famous. Solomon Hykes, right? They turned down some $1 billion offer. Seems like nothing now for that at Microsoft. I think probably should have taken the money, but good problems. What do we say? First world problems for everyone there. That's right. Yeah. No, I was walking around the other day and I was like, if that came to me, would my initial response be, something wondering about what I would research, and would I get, as big a monitor as I want on my desk? Or would you just come back immediately and be like, 100's nice, but 400 would really be nice. Do you start with a bigger number and hope, or do you just hope, assuming there's a bunch of $100 million coupons, he's going to run out of them at some point. They're like the Willy Wonka chocolate factory ones. And then you're like, well, then we're done, So I'm curious about that. And then I'm also super curious, are those people that are getting the $100 million thing, are they going to be set aside somewhere? Are they going to have to mix with the other Facebook or Meta researchers? That level of jealousy has got to be off the charts. I know we used to, when I worked at Cisco had famously, they had acquired this one company super early in their history. That company went on to build their biggest product and made tons of money for everybody, but they made a lot of money. And then they kept spinning out. They kept sort of, pretending they were going to leave, or saying they were going to leave, and then Cisco would buy them back, and it caused so much upheaval within the company, because it was basically they're the only people. This little group of people are the only ones that have good ideas, and everybody else just gets to work on the backlog, and it created so much sort of animosity. I'm curious if these AI researchers are all just making tons of money that it doesn't matter, and they're just well, I can bounce over to OpenAI and come back, or is this does this create internal cultural rifts? Well, I think it almost has to. I think there's just a million examples of assembling, even if you have infinite money, right? There's still many examples of people going off, assembling the greatest team of all time. Athletics is a great example, but you can kind of pick anything, right? Movies is better, right? You hire the best director, the best people, and they make a bad movie. So it's almost for sure, some of this is going to end badly, right? It's almost definite. And that'd be great for podcasting, right? As people leave and all the infighting. The Facebook one looks like the most tenuous one, because they've hired multiple executives, not AI researchers, executives, right? Who are in theory, the people that are going to manage this. And that in itself, if you've got more than one, you've got a problem. So I think that is the first question. And then the second question is just like, well, nobody really knows. This is why people are getting paid this huge amount of money. Really, no one knows when the next breakthrough is going to come through, or if it's just everyone just needs to do the same thing. But it's such a small group of people, right? We're talking like a handful. Maybe even, I don't know, maybe it's like 50 people in the world that can really move the needle on this, like when you really get down to it. So if you're these huge companies, it's just like, I just want as many of them as possible working for me. And I just hope that they come up with the next innovation, because that's going to make my company worth another $1 trillion.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think these large AI labs, these, the big 5, big 6 or whatever, do you think they have the equivalent of, what sports teams have in terms of like their front office and their general manager and they must have people that are like pouring through research documents. They're looking at, Hugging Face. You got to figure out who the next whatever people are. Do you think they have the equivalent of like a trade machine kind of thing that
I think for sure. I think they do.
People.
I think they definitely do. I think they have like sort of a list of like, here's the top talent. But, as I like to say a lot, like nobody knows anything, right? It's again, we'll just go back to sports or anything like that. It's like all you can know is that this person, and it's probably a lot of word of mouth. This person worked there, and maybe you could look at the research papers, but it's probably just a word of mouth. People are like, this person owned OpenAI. They were really the person behind the scenes. Like, Ilya Skutserberg, they got all the publicity, but like this other person was the one doing, like, figured out this complicated math. And of course, like, how are you going to reference check that? What are you going to do? How are you going to interview for that? So I think there's a lot. I mean, I just think, it only for people that have infinite money, we just be like, it doesn't matter. I don't care if I waste $1 billion on this in salaries. It's the upside is so big. And this is where like there are no business rules, right? And this is why maybe Zuckerberg and Facebook, because he sort of has total control of the company. And I don't think any board of directors is like, why are you spending $500 million on salaries for these people? That's crazy. Whereas like maybe at Microsoft or Google, it comes up, right? There's at least an HR person like, we don't have bands for this. We don't like, this is not like, this is what you're saying before. There's somebody in the HR review. It's like, we have no, like, this has broken everything in our compensation model. Like, we need to think about this, right? Whereas Zuckerberg's just like, 100, 150? Like, doesn't even, to your point about negotiating, like, why not ask for 50 more, right? Be like, well, I'll do it for, like, who knows? Like, if it was worth 100, is it worth 150? Probably.
Right. Yeah. No, it's got to be a weird world. I do wish that there was, for the rest of us that either don't get to be part of the negotiations, but also don't know who these people are. Like, we should get the equivalent of like fantasy sports for it, right? Like, we should be able to somehow bet on this. We should get to see who's the leaders, who are the up and comers, because when they have these, when they have these announcements that come out, or a year from now, somebody will ping us and go, hey, I'm so-and-so from this public relations. I have this person that started a company. They were at OpenAI. I want to know, like, were they a B player? Were they a C player? Were they an A? Like, I need to filter myself, because we're going to start getting these the same way that we used to get during the cloud native era. Like, oh, this person used to work at Google. This person used to work at Facebook. They built a system. They have a new thing. So
I think we have to wait for the screenplay. The Hulu screenplay is being written out, and we'll just see who they pick out as like the number one characters, because those will be the best podcast guest.
Well, in the screenplay thing, and I'll put this in the show notes, there is a new movie out. So for the folks who did the guy who was the producer, I think his name is Jesse Armstrong. He was the producer for the show Succession, which basically kind of chronicled the like Fox News kind of thing. He has a new show called Mountainhead. It's a new movie. It's on HBO Max, or maybe I think is it on HBO or it's on Max, whatever the thing is called. But it's basically this idea that like these 4 guys who are the equivalent of like Peter Thiel, Zuckerberg, and like, 2 or 3 other guys that are sort of in that class of people go off on this mountain retreat. And it's kind of this insane sort of, how do those guys think about, carving up the world. But if you want to kind of get the behind the scenes, you won't get any first round draft pick stuff out of it, but you will get a little bit of, what goes on behind the scenes. All right. Well, let's do this. We put a bunch of stuff in the show notes, a bunch of links as we always do. We will talk to all those things. But since you and I have been sort of talking offline, there was a presentation that came out that I became aware of. I don't know if you listened to the BG2 podcast. It's a couple of venture capital guys, but there was an event called East Meets West, which I guess has been going on for like 10 years. And as part of that, this is one of these events which is huge VCs, startups, some people that do money stuff in between these folks, put together this presentation. And you and I have been looking at this kind of on and off for the last week or so. Lots of interesting stuff in here. Big brain stuff, big thinker, big trend stuff. Think sort of Mary Meeker, internet report.
Yeah, good analogy.
Type of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Give me let's spend most of today's news of the whatever on this thing, because it is a very good mix of sort of like what's going on with the cloud, what's going on with the biggest companies, what's going on with the biggest trends, what's going on with AI. What I know you pulled out a few things out of this that you thought were interesting, and we'll put a link in the show notes to it. What were some of the big observations you saw from these things that'll keep you thinking about stuff for a while?
Well, probably the first one to start with is, we talk so much about AI, and it's one of those questions when I say, is it overhyped? Like, what's going on? Like, and I think one of the things that this whole presentation does is it has a couple stats in here and a couple things. The reason, the justification, I would say, about like why should everyone care, is that we've basically never seen something grow this fast, right? When they show like how quickly OpenAI, just being one, basically reaches like 100 million, users and are reaching like $1 billion run rate. Like it's never happened before. So on one hand, it sort of feels like this is all we talk about. But at the same thing, it's like we're seeing stuff that we've just never seen before. And, there's the usage of it. And then there's, they had a great slide in here. I think it was Anthropic. And it took them 21 months to get their first $1 billion in revenue. But then it only took them something like 2 months to go to the next billion, right? And then it was even faster, and maybe 1 month to go even faster. So it's like we're seeing rates of adoption and revenue that have just never happened before. So that's sort of like where I think the starting point is. And now, to be fair about it, so we don't get a lot of emails, we've also never seen companies lose money faster than this, right? I mean, as far as like spend it. So I think that's like the first thing, though, is like, I think we kind of get desensitized to these numbers and these adoption rates and their growth rates, but like we've never seen anything like this. And we've lived through like lots of big things, the internet, Facebook, mobile, all of those things. So I don't know. That's kind of where I thought. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think, I think it's useful to sort of see these things because, like you said, I think we become kind of immune to the numbers. I mean, we literally spent the first 10 minutes of this show talking about just dozens of people getting $100 million contracts, essentially. Like that's insane. But yeah, so that sort of blows me away. And then I think I was very interested in some of I'm always interested when they talk about transitions, right? There's always the list of, companies that make it through the transition, the companies that don't make it through the transition. And like, what are some of those leading indicators that sort of tell us, hey, because I think what happens is, right now there are so many, sort of mega companies, whether it's the 5 or 6 hyperscalers or some of the AI labs, but they did a very good job, at least, at least in a couple of slides, of pointing out some things that are like, hey, I know that company's still huge, and I kind of focused in on Amazon. I think I talked about it on last week's show, or maybe I'm planning to for this week. I can't remember. But like there are some trends in there that are worth kind of digging into and being like, oh, okay, these are some things that are going to give me some sense that the transition's happening from, sort of cloud being the dominant, technology trend to AI being the dominant trend. But like, what looks like it's going to come out of that? Because it's, we have a tendency to always think when we're in the middle of it, oh, that company will be big and great forever. They have gigantic moats. Nobody's ever going to overtake them. And then, you kind of think back and you go, well, yeah, but Amazon started off, AWS started off having 0 at one point in time, right? Yeah, so yeah, that I thought was really interesting.
But to your point, right there was a really good slide about, this being the cloud news of the month. Let's talk about specific cloud. And the one that really jumped out, and I think you hit on it in your Sunday conversation, was for the most part, the proportional spend between cloud revenue and, if you will, NVIDIA market share, or how many GPUs you're buying, is pretty much the same. So like Microsoft, let's say they're 30% of the cloud revenue. They've got about 30% of the GPUs. Google, 20% of the cloud revenue, 20% of the GPUs. But when you go to Amazon, the chart is striking. 40% of the cloud revenue, but they only get 20% of the GPUs relative.
Yeah.
And so that is like to me, that was the most, I don't know, this is sort of like, Is this why Selipsky got fired? Right? Like this, like to me, that's a really telling statistic. It's like you could say, I understand before anyone at Amazon says anything. I know about Trainium. I know about Inferentia. I'm not saying they don't have their own chips, but that's a pretty big jump to be like, wow, we don't need as much NVIDIA because we have our own chips. It feels like much more likely we don't have as much demand, right? I mean, to me, that's the thing. And that to me is striking. And that was like one of the biggest takeaways there. So that's going to be, I don't know how often they'll publish this chart. And again, like some of this data is derived. So like, I don't know. I mean, like, you know, maybe it's not 100% accurate, but like, even if the trend is correct, something's up, right? Something is up there about what isn't going on in AWS. So I don't know. I know you already kind of did some of that conversation on your previous show, but like any thoughts on that?
I mean, that one to me was fascinating because I think, you know, to a certain extent, I think we'd all paid attention to, okay, it felt like all the big labs were they were writing the biggest blank check possible to NVIDIA. And it was just like, just send me every pallet of GPUs you could. And so to finally see it broken out as that's how far behind Amazon is to their biggest competitors. And you know, obviously there's some others in there, XAI and some other things. But it tells me probably three things. One, they weren't spending nearly as much on model building, which we all sort of know, because like there isn't really like a go-to Amazon model. There's Meta's got them and Gemini and all the others. So, you know, they weren't spending on building their own models, whether that's at the Amazon level or the AWS level. Number two, they bet on themselves, which again, this sort of comes from the idea of, well, some of their previous bets on themselves, again, a lot of the ARM stuff had made sense. They obviously had, you know, an ability to build out chips, but it doesn't, you know, it seems like they bet on themselves maybe too much. And then I think the bigger piece of that, you know, and again, this is where I don't know how to derive from what they're doing, but it does feel like, you know, sort of early mover on this is going to be such a huge advantage that, like, you know, if somebody tells you, well, we feel like we're a year behind, they might realistically be like 5 years behind.
Yeah, maybe like over whatever, right? You know, kind of back to the early cloud days, right? We'll think about everyone that had a public cloud, right? And how many people ultimately, you know, had to end there. So, yeah, well, I mean, you think about it. What everyone used to say, or even Amazon used to say, like, "Hey, we're 5 years ahead of everyone," and you're like, "Well, no, you guys got the same compute or the same whatever." And it was like, no, you don't understand the level of automation we've done, or you don't understand the level of being able to build out those data centers. So yeah, that was fascinating. And again, like you said, it's one snapshot, but still it's like, boy, that. Well, another thing I want to connect the dots a little bit with this presentation on Amazon was like, so there's there's another slide in here specifically about Microsoft employment, how many Microsoft employees they had. And they basically kind of make the case implicitly or explicitly that, hey, you know, these companies will not need as many employees going forward to make as much money. And they kind of show Microsoft's employment kind of coming down after some like reductions and things like that. But I want to pair that up with, you know, another thing that came out this week or this month was Amazon and Andy Jassy. He wrote a memo that is probably mostly for investors, but just to make it real short, it just said something like all Amazon employees better be using AI. And by the way, we're going to need less of you, right? I mean, that's essentially the gist of that memo. And I was I'm really shocked by that from Amazon, because it's sort of like, you know, to use Amazon parlance, it's like, it's day two thinking, right? It's like when you take like, they're not, at least proportionally, they don't have as many GPUs, right, going, and they're not building models to what you said before, right? And then you have, you know, this idea that like, well, you know, we're just going to get more, we're going to take what we have, we're going to be more efficient, we're going to get rid of employees, that being kind of the message. And I'm just like, wow, it's like it's almost like your private equity. You're like kind of like optimizing for profits in the middle of like, I don't know, one of the greatest technology changes ever. And it's like, I'm thinking the opposite. I'm like, man, there's like an infinite number of things that could be done with just AWS alone, just the 200 services there, just the way we interact with AWS. In my mind, I envision like an AWS AI or an agent. I don't have to use all this console stuff. It all just works, and it makes my VPCs, and then, you know, optimizes my EC2s. And, you know, it's like, I just think of like, I mean, and don't even get me started on Amazon.com. Use it all the time. Huge fan of it. But like, man, Rufus, come on, we can do a lot better than Rufus, right? And searching for that. And I'm just like, but the mindset, right? It's like, wow, it's like we can reduce where I'm like, Amazon of all companies is like the one where it's like, going from retail into AWS, always launching crazy things with like satellites and other, airlines and stuff like that. And I'm like, really? This is the message you're taking away from this? You're not like, man, I can only do 10 things. Now I can do 50 things. And that to me, again, I don't know, maybe I'm conflating two things, but I was like, that's just shocking to me. I'm just shocked by that kind of ethos coming out of Amazon.
Yeah. So there was a bunch of things. You touched on a bunch of things. I think there's a couple of interesting things coming out of this. One is, number one, trying to be like a public CEO or even just a well-known company CEO, like has got to be a fantastically difficult thing right now, because anything that you say internally your team is getting leaked. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, on one hand, I understand if, because I've seen this at a few companies here recently, I get a chance to go out and talk to a lot of different companies, but like there is definitely this sort of yin and yang that's going on with CEOs where they're like, okay, I'm finally realizing like the potential impact that this stuff has, right? Whether it's because they rolled out Gemini or Copilot to 10,000 people, or they're seeing what their competition did. And so there feels like this very distinct moment where if you weren't sort of eyes wide open to it, you're now eyes wide open and you're like, we need to get on board with this stuff. We need to make it part of what we do. And if you're not, then, I don't know that we necessarily need you around. Like and to a certain extent, like that should probably be the mindset that leaders have all the time, which is like, we have technology that could push us forward, that could make us better. Yeah, it has some unknowns, and yeah, it probably has some sharp edges and stuff. We've done that a million times before. I feel like there's way more pushback from people these days because they're like, well, I'm worried about my job, or I'm worried about how much energy it is, or whatever it is. And I think getting that communication right is really hard right now because they don't really know what to do. But I think the bigger thing it highlights, because there was two announcements from Andy in the last week or two, and I think they both come across looking horrible for Amazon. The first one is the one that you said, which is he said, basically we're going to have less employees, which is bad enough in itself because it didn't seem to be based on anything that was like, hey, we've given you these AI tools and you're not any more productive, and we're going to give, or we've measured this for a few quarters and it's not productive. So it feels very undata driven by Amazon. And then he had the article that, he just, again, this is one of those, did he put this out or did it get leaked? But it was like, here's all the things we're doing with generative AI. It's all over the place. But the thing that jumps out at me, and your Rufus example is a perfect example, which one is front and center, right? What is the one great Gen AI tool that they have? And I don't think they've figured it out. And if we summarize the whole market, like the whole market is like, well, there's ChatGPT, and then there's a bunch of other stuff. And I think Amazon hasn't even figured out what's their one thing. And Andy trying to compensate for that by writing, here's 1,000 things we've done. And it's like, yeah, but do you have one? Like, what's your EC2 of Gen AI?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
I don't think they can point to that.
Yeah, well, in this same presentation we're talking about, they've got statistics here that basically, they're using stuff like TikTok, Instagram to compare ChatGPT, which doesn't have the viral thing. They're saying people are using ChatGPT 29 minutes a day. So to your point, like there is no Amazon or anything like that. And the other thing that strikes me too is like, for so long, probably on this show and others, we've sort of like make fun of Google, like, oh, they're killing stuff off. And it's like, but when you watch Google, it's like, Gemini, awesome. I've been using Gemini more. I think it's like very comparable to ChatGPT. Just today or yesterday, or whenever the show comes out, probably a week ago, they just announced Gemini's CLI, basically their command line tool, which is very similar to Anthropic's command line tool. And it's just like, so you're seeing like, and of course we talked about a little bit about AI search, the fact that they put the snippets up there, and it's like they are pumping out competitive products every single week. Like, I mean, it's impressive, right? And so you can say like maybe ChatGPT has won the mind share, but when you start to actually dig into these products, you're like, oh, this is Google. You know what? They have a lot of good stuff. Like, as you start to use it, you're like, it's comparable. It's better in some places, but it's like they're on the field playing the game, right? Maybe you like one or the other, but they have lots of competitive stuff. Whereas you said before, we're just kind of we're just pounding poor Rufus to death here. It's like, you got Amazon.
Right.
That's not even, they're not even in the same league, right? They don't even have the tools, right? They don't have anything that's even related. So, really just it's interesting because Amazon and AWS, we've talked about them so long for being the dominant leader for probably, I don't know, almost the entire duration of this show, for however many years you've been doing it. But it's like, it feels distinctly different right now, that they are an infrastructure provider and they are great at that. Kudos, right? But when you go on the other side, you're like, I don't see it.
Right. Well, and I'll throw another name out there that I think, I remember distinctly, you and I, we did a show, I don't know, this was a year ago or so. And we were like, right now, Satya Nadella is the king of the world, right? Like he has this great partnership with OpenAI going on. They've got, they're sort of first to market with this stuff. I mean, they were ahead of Google. They had, the OpenAI stuff. They had Copilot. We thought Copilot with this awesome name, it was kind of being spread across all their product lines. And I think in terms of first mover, from a business perspective, like an enterprise IT, or at least in the enterprise, they have sort of that equivalent that ChatGPT does. Now, I don't know that people have as much affinity for the Copilot name as they do ChatGPT. I think it's in the ballpark from an enterprise perspective. But boy, the negotiations they've got going on are fascinating, because it feels like, it's felt for a while like it was a little shaky because OpenAI was sort of shaky, but it feels like OpenAI is pulling as hard as they possibly can and away from Microsoft. And I think most of it's not that they don't like working with Microsoft. I think it's because they look at it as our business model is so kind of kludged up that there's so much potential for us, and it feels like so much of that potential is going to go over to Microsoft. But it feels like if Microsoft doesn't put together the right structure for allowing OpenAI to grow crazy, but they have still retained certain things, like, Satya could be in the all-time Hall of Fame, or he could be in the, oh my gosh, wait, why did you think so short-term in that decision? And I think that's going to be,
yeah, well, I think you hit on it. It's really business development. I mean, Microsoft is in this because of the great deal. Like, OpenAI needed them, right? And really, they are the ones that funded the ultimately the building out of ChatGPT, right? They're the ones that basically said, okay, like, you can use all this infrastructure and we'll give you all these credits. So on one hand, it doesn't really exist without them, but now things have completely flipped. I think OpenAI seems like you're limiting us. Right? You're limiting what we want to do. Even Microsoft too. I thought Copilot was in the pole position, but like, it's really been lapped by like Cursor, Anthropic. Like, the tools just aren't as good. Maybe they'll catch up. But to your point, like, the faster we go, right, the better Cursor gets, the better Anthropic gets. And so it's really the ace in the hole, right, is they have they basically have the controlling stake, right, or the biggest vote with what ChatGPT can do. And so I think if you are Satya and you're kind of figuring out, it's like, you got to play that card very carefully. You need to simultaneously make sure ChatGPT does grow to the heights it can get at, but at the same time, you need to extract from that whatever the Microsoft value that you want. And that is a super tricky situation. And then, I read the Sam Altman book, The Optimist, and if there's one takeaway from it, it's like, Sam Altman, relationships don't generally end well. There's a lot of examples of where those relationships that do not necessarily end well. So I expect it'll be a contentious summer of continuing negotiations, and it will probably not end well, but there will be a nice selfie. There'll be a good selfie to put on it, but there'll be a lot of backstory to it. Yeah. No, well, and I think it's fascinating. I'll use one data point. Like I said, I get a chance to get out and talk to a lot of companies. So you mentioned, I'll use a couple of data points. So you mentioned Cursor. That's you've been talking about that for a while. I think there was some data that just recently went out that Cursor is now more widely used than GitHub Copilot. Mm-hmm. So that sort of advantage is now starting to slip away a little bit. Now, I don't know how necessarily they measure it and how much of that's, enterprise versus whatever. But I had an interesting conversation with a large
a large bank. I'll keep their region and their name obviously out of the conversation. They basically started 18 months ago trying to figure out what to do. They went through the normal process of hey, let's figure out all the use cases ahead of time. Let's business justify it. And, basically came back and they're like, that's untenable. We just need to allocate a certain amount of budget. Let's go get started. They get started. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars last year starting this stuff. And they were like, it's going really well. And I'm like, okay, cool. What's going on? And they're like, well, we rolled out Copilot to 50,000 people and, whatever. And then we kind of got into well, how are you measuring stuff? How do you know it's going better? And this is where they kind of came back and they said, well, it's interesting. We don't really have internal KPIs because nobody knows what success looks like. He's like, there's this thing floating around, which is, we should be 25 or 30 or 40% more efficient. And they were like, I don't know how we're necessarily going to measure that because, nobody wants to measure the old model. But his other part was, it was they don't give us the details to tell us how in use it is. It's just, is it on or is it off? Is somebody using it or somebody not using it?
Right.
And I only highlight these things because if we're watching how fast everything moves and the ability to sort of know if your customers like your stuff or don't like your stuff, and they can flip to something else quickly, this lead that we've sort of imagined that Microsoft has could go away very, very quickly.
Yeah.
With somebody getting stuff right. And I think it ties in perfectly to your, the conversation that you and Cote had, which I think we'll probably republish on ours as well, of native AI versus bolt-on AI. And I feel like the guys doing native AI, even though they're all relatively smaller, are going to be at such an advantage to adoption versus the ones who are well, you kind of got to, clunk it in here and plug it in there. And it feels like there's a bunch of these sort of things kind of moving independently, but they do feel like there's a lot of correlation between them.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think that's going to be the defining thing. And that's sort of the race we're about to see is the tools that are built, AI native versus the bolt-ons. And today Cursor's winning. Well, and we'll see. We'll see how, things can always change, but it's kind of back to those large companies. I don't know. I just is this a part-time hobbyist developer? When you start, it's just you start touching it. When you start using it, you're like, this is making me infinitely more productive. So it's it's almost coming back to, I don't know why I need to drink water so much, but I just have to have it. It's just part of it. And I think that's where these tools have gotten to.
Yeah. I'm going to kind of wrap it up because we could probably go multiple hours on this thing. I think I would love, we're going to put a link in the show notes. I think I put one in the one last week as well. If you were to sum up this whole thing, kind of everything that's in there, kind of the sentiment that's in there, maybe one or two sentences, how would you sum up what's in this collection of data? Because again, we got to remember this is, like you said, it's not exact data. It's playing to venture capitalists. It's playing to the crowd that's sort of on the edge. But how would you maybe sum up the couple sentences? What all is in this presentation?
Well, I would say the following. I'd be AI has never, as far as everything we've seen, as I said before, nothing has grown faster or been adopted faster than what we're seeing right now. And I think that's step one. And I think step two is there are probably inside of here the potential for another, $1 trillion company of some kind. Okay. That would be the third. And the third thing I would say, kind of back to the Zuckerberg stuff before, is while all of these people have fancy titles and many of them have tons of money, absolutely nobody has any idea what's going on, right? And I think you can look at Zuckerberg's actions because it's just easy to see. It's he's basically blown up his entire AI team and trying to rebuild it all after some early success with Llama. And I think you just go all the things we talked about, right? I think Microsoft doesn't know what to do, so they've got a partnership to do. We've already talked about AWS. The one thing we know, although we don't think they're doing something good today, is we know Jassie's thinking about it, so they're going to do something. Yeah. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's it's pretty early. I mean, it's to the point of it's not only early, it's nobody knows how it's going to play out. So anyone that tells you that they know what's going to happen is just lying. So that's why I think it's going to be fun for us to watch. But I do think for all of us, I don't know. I didn't need the email from or the memo from Jassy. It's I just think you got to try all of this stuff. I'm just constantly playing with it and trying to figure out. I always think to myself when I'm doing something how can I use AI? Because that's just good for us all to be how do we leverage it? How do we make ourselves smarter? So that's what I'm doing, and that's what I would recommend everyone else try to do with their time as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's the biggest takeaway I have from this is like there are going to be some macro level things that are coming out of this, whether it's leaders become followers in this or new companies emerge, but I think this thing does a pretty good job. And again, like you're not gonna convince everybody who's decided that like AI is a bad thing or it should slow down or it should be more restricted or whatever. But like I think there's enough data in here that should put a pretty good, maybe not convince you, but put a pretty good direction in your head that like, as fast as these companies are moving, as fast as this stuff is moving, you probably ought to be matching that rate of curiosity and adoption and, trying to make this part of what you do kind of every day. And if you're not, just looking at these trends, looking at the big numbers, like that may be as far behind as you get in your career, in your expertise, in your field of domain or whatever it might be. So yeah, those are, I think my takeaways were pretty much aligned with kind of where yours were, is that, there's a lot here. You can take it in, you can do it, but like this is a hands-on trend and folks ought to be pretty hands-on with this stuff. And more so than anything else. All right, man. Well, listen. And one last thing. People will probably be listening to this afterwards, but we'll put it out as well. Your folks, you and Cote and myself and Aaron have been talking about trying to do a few more things together. I know we overlap each other somewhat on how we do shows, and we've always been pretty good about sharing stuff. I think we're going to try and do some more things together, do some things in some new formats. I think we're finding that people learn things in different ways. So if you listen to the show, if you listen to Software Defined Talk this past week, Brandon and Cote did a nice 15-minute sort of borrowing the dithering format to talk about some stuff. I think we're going to repost that so people can kind of get a sense of a different format. But I think collectively we're gonna start doing some things. We've got some ideas that'll probably take us a little bit to kind of roll it out. But would love to hear your feedback on either new formats for, ways to consume this cloud and AI stuff, or, even just listen to the 15-minute one. So if you get a chance, hit us up, show@thecloudcast.net, or if you happen to pop into SDT Slack, hit us up there as well. So we've got some things kind of cooking and stirring in the pot, and we'll probably start rolling it out sooner than later, but would love to hear your feedback if you've got ideas on, how you want to consume this information, whether it's news or opinion or whatever analysis or whatever it might be. So, all right, man. Well, thank you very much. Try and stay cool for the next, however long it's going to be in Texas.
Amen. Amen.
We've got 58 days till college football kicks off. That means probably 30 days until the preview shows come out. So we just got to get through the next, 30, 45 days.
All right, we'll do it. We'll do it with our AI tools.
That's right.
Those will occupy us until football.
That's right. All right. Well, that's that. I want to wrap it up. Thanks, Brandon, as always, for joining for Cloud and AI News of the Month. And with that, folks, we'll talk to you next month.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.